I'm going to do something a little different in this episode. This will be the first episode in which I present a guide to how to read a specific work. And in this case, the specific work is going to be the Iliad of Homer. And I want to provide information that you could use to approach this work on your own and get something out of it. I'll try to give you a sufficient background to at least get you started, and then demonstrate through a close look at least the beginning of the poem, how you need to read something like this to enjoy, but also to learn something from. Let's start with just a little bit of background. First, this work is an epic poem, and in the work, you're going to see the poet speaking sometimes in his own voice, you might say, as the narrator, and sometimes in the voices of the characters within the poem. And that can be significant sometimes because there will be information revealed as the narrator that may conflict with information presented in the voice of a character. And that can be insightful and interesting. His characters will include human heroes such as Achilles and Agamemnon, but it also includes gods. These are figures such as Zeus and Apollo. And like most epic poems, this begins in a way in the middle of things, in medias res, as the Romans would later say, and it focuses on one aspect of the Trojan War. The poem does not contain any reference to the use of the Trojan horse or the actual destruction of Troy. Those events take place after the time span covered by this poem. So if you come into this poem expecting to read about a Trojan horse, that's not in it. For more background, I would actually advise against getting too in-depth into the debates about who Homer was and how the poem was constructed. You can sort of get by with just a little bit of information on this. And most of the information being just what was traditionally understood. You can kind of get pretty far along just with that. So the traditional understanding is that Homer was a Greek poet who worked orally, meaning he didn't write this down. His poem wasn't written down until centuries later. He was part of a tradition of oral poetry, and he lived somewhere between 800 BC and 600 BC. But the events he writes about, the period in which they're set, would have actually been even several centuries before that. So it's in the distant past even for Homer and his first audience. Formerly, it was believed that this whole business of the Trojan War was entirely fictional, but later archaeological evidence has uncovered a city site near what would have been the site of Troy, which means the western coast of modern Turkey. There was a walled city that was destroyed in battle, and then it was rebuilt over a few times, and then the site was abandoned. And the site was destroyed in battle around the time in which the traditional dating of the Trojan War would have been. So within about a century of that. So it seems there may have been some actual historical basis for all this. Obviously, this is not to say that the story is true, but just that some real events might have inspired it. When you read the poem, you'll notice that Homer describes two different groups of people. One group of people are the ones who are besieging Troy. We refer to them as Greeks, or we think of them as Mycenaean Greeks. That's how we refer to them, but Homer refers to them as Achaians or Danaans. They are Greek-speaking people, and they sailed from Greece to Turkey. And the reasons for their doing this, just to give you the setup, Homer's initial audience would have understood something of the setup. And basically the idea is a Trojan prince named Paris ran away with the wife of his Greek, he was visiting Greece, and his host was a man named Menelaus. Menelaus' wife, Helen, was the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris ran away with her, stole her away, and Menelaus had a powerful brother named Agamemnon, who was the most powerful of the Mycenaean chieftains. And Agamemnon assembled a bunch of other chieftains with himself at the head, pulled together a fleet, and sailed to Troy. And they besieged the city, but before that, they took lots of towns, captured a lot of booty, and then they besieged the town for about 10 years before it fell. At the time of the poem, there's a lot of plunder that's taken place, but the city is still strongly defended, and aside from some occasional skirmishes between the forces, the besiegers can't really do much to take it. And in the poem, you need to be aware that it's Bronze Age technology. So you're going to see warriors depicted as wielding bronze weapons and in bronze armor. They're riding in chariots. They throw spears. They have swords that they brandish sometimes in close to hand-to-hand combat, but usually they're throwing spears around. Battles are largely conceived of as almost like lots of little one-on-one fights rather than an organized formation moving around in a directed manner. Although there are a few instances in which we do see organized formations. But in general, it's not organized warfare as it would become in later Greek combat. There's a lot of ritual combat and ritual personal combat that takes place in the poem. Okay, so that's enough by way of background. When you come to a poem like this, when you come to a work like this, a poem, a play, a novel, many times works of philosophy as well, you want to pay close attention to what happens at the beginning. The reason why is it's a crucial point. It's the point in which you want to hook your audience and also give your audience the information they need to follow what you proceed to do. So that beginning will be a crucial point to pay attention to. You want to pay attention to where the writer seems to be introducing key themes, key words, concepts, major characters. So you want to pay attention to where that seems to happen, and I'll try to illustrate places where that seems to happen. I'll be looking at this in translation, just as you probably would also be reading it in translation. You can still get a lot out of it in translation. But before we get to the translation, I'll just give you the first line in original Greek. And the first line goes, Meinin aidetea peleiado Achilles. What that first line does is introduce one of the key concepts of the poem. And it's the first word, rage. Meinin means rage, wrath, or anger. And when you translate that first line, it basically is saying, sing, goddess, of the rage of Achilles, the son of Peleus. So why is rage the theme of this poem? What is it about rage that makes it an important theme? And I want to give you two perspectives on why rage is the theme of the poem. And the first perspective, think of an action movie. Think of the movie Taken. So in that movie, Liam Neeson plays a character who he's divorced from his wife. His wife has married another man, and this other man is successful in what you might call the modern sense. He has a lot of money. He has a fair amount of social status. He seems to be a well-educated man, and his daughter is being raised by, Liam Neeson's daughter is being raised by his ex-wife and her new husband. Liam Neeson is actually closer to a man in the Greek sense, a successful or important man in the ancient sense, the sense in which Homer understands it. He's not rich. He's not good at making money. He doesn't have the things that give you social status today. He has, as he says, a certain set of skills. He's good at working for the CIA and accomplishing its tasks. And in the movie and in many other action movies, something is done, his daughter is taken, and this provokes in him a very natural response of rage, and I would say rage in the sense that Homer intends it. Meaning, it's not just some blind anger, but it is a controlled and focused anger which fuels his actions throughout the film. Like, he proceeds to act in a very reasonable manner, but a reasonable manner in pursuit of, I'm going to get my daughter back and I'll harm anybody that gets in the way. And that's pretty much what happens in the film. And it's done in a controlled way. He's not under control. He's not like frothing at the mouth angry. And that's also what Homer means. He doesn't mean frothing at the mouth angry, but he means this kind of rage of the warrior, of a trained man who, nevertheless, when his emotions are raised up by something, is capable of incredible deeds, but also incredible destruction. And in fact, that's how Homer himself puts it. So in the very next few lines, the wrath that he's talking about is a destructive wrath, which brought countless woes upon the Achaeans. Those are Achilles' allies, by the way. His own friends are going to suffer. Okay, so that's one aspect of why rage is the theme, because it is a motivating force for heroes, men of action. And it is a popular topic. It is a topic that people like to see, and they like to see how it works its way out. That's one reason why Homer would choose it. And another reason, and this one is a little bit more complicated, and for this one, you need to think of a particular view of human being, the person or the soul, as divided into three parts. One part is associated with desires, with pleasures and pains. This is the part that responds to hunger and thirst, sexual desire, the need for sleep. These are desires, and then pains. It tries to avoid pains. And that's a big part of who we are for the Greeks. But it's also a part that should not always be followed, right? The sexual desire has to be controlled. You don't go around having sex in public. You shouldn't gorge yourself on food at all times. That can be bad for your health. Under certain illnesses, you like if you have dropsy, you shouldn't drink water. If you are overly fond of alcohol, you shouldn't drink too much. And yet, people who are alcoholics have an excessive desire for drink or for drunkenness. Their desires overcome their better reason. That part of you which tells you, I shouldn't do this, that's your reason, or logos. That is your, let's say, your higher faculties. That is the part of you that understands. That is the part of you that foresees, that is capable of understanding consequences. And this part, in a well-ordered soul, should be in charge, in large part. This is the part that it should control the desires, especially if the desires become unruly. But there's another part that's in between those two, and that is actually kind of a mediator between those two. And this is the part that rage is characteristic of. And this middle part is the part that has to do with the desire for honor, the desire to put oneself forward, the desire to acquire status. This is also a crucial part of the human psyche, because human society is hierarchical. Well, there are naturally dominance hierarchies among human beings. And your sense of honor and self-assertion and your self-worth, that is a crucial part that allows you to see, or that allows you to understand your place in a dominance hierarchy and find your place within it and secure that place, hold on to it. And when that place is threatened, rage is the natural emotion associated with that. And I'll give you a low example of exactly this. Let's say that you work in a company and you were promised a promotion to an important position, and you waited for it for a couple of years, and then the position was given to the boss's son instead, and they just tell you to go pound sand. Your natural reaction should be some form of anger at this. Your reaction to this can't be explained simply by reference to reason. Your reason just understands it. And it can't be explained by reference to your emotions, your desires for, food and drink. It's something in between. It's that sense of honor. And that's a key element in human being. And it's a key element in how humans function in a society. And because it's a key element, you might even say the key element for how humans function in society. That is why it's at the source of what Homer is doing in this poem. So on the one hand, rage is the theme because it is a popular theme, a common theme for looking at human actions, and a thing that people like to see play out, and also because it is the emotion characteristic of a situation in which a crucial part of oneself is denied. One's self-assertion or sense of one's own honor is denied. And while we live in a modern society that is a mercantile society and the sense of honor is severely downplayed. Nevertheless, people have it. It remains important. It remains a thing that is useful, but also potentially dangerous. So with all that said, then, let's start to look at the poem. Let's take a look at the beginning. So, same goddess of the rays of Peleus' son Achilles, the destructive wrath which brought countless woes upon the Achaeans, and sent forth to Hades many valiant souls of heroes, and made themselves spoil for dogs and every bird. So right away, we can see that there is a conception of humanity that is presented here. And that conception of humanity is one in which human being is some kind of combination of soul and body. The soul goes to Hades once death happens, but your body is still yourself, because it says it made themselves, meaning their bodies, spoil for dogs and every bird. Your body becomes just a part of nature upon death. Now, it's crucial to the Homeric religion, as we see later, that the body not be left as spoil for a dog or a bird. It has to be properly buried. The soul cannot rest in Hades if the body is not properly treated. Furthermore, there's some form of divinity in Homer's world. There is reference to the plan of Zeus coming to fulfillment. So in this world, there are gods and there are human beings, and human actions can sometimes happen in fulfillment of a divine plan. Now, one might assume that most likely it's great heroes who are enacting a divine plan. Nevertheless, human actions can sometimes be explained by reference to gods. But another factor about the gods, and one which actually has been controversial even since ancient times, is that Homer depicts the gods as contending with one another, as in disagreement, and also as in setting humans into disagreement. Because in the very next line, the narrator asks, who then of the gods was it that brought these two together to contend? And he means these two, the son of Atreus, which is Agamemnon, and then, of course, Achilles, who is the subject of the poem. So someone set them in conflict, and it turns out to be Apollo. Apollo set them in conflict. And why did he do it? Well, because one of his priests came to the Achaeans. The Achaeans, like I said, had plundered many areas around Troy, and they captured this priest's daughter. And so the priest comes to them and says, hey, give me my daughter back. I'll give you a wonderful ransom. And also, if you accept it, you will be reverencing Apollo. What Homer shows us is this is not a world in which these men are merely pirates or brigands. Representatives of the other side can come to them and ransom back persons who have been taken. And in fact, as Homer depicts it, this is a popular proposal. All the rest of the Achaeans shouted assent, he says, to reverence the priest and accept the glorious ransom. So it's not dishonoring to give up the daughter, which is a trophy from battle. It's not dishonor because you're receiving the ransom is quite glorious. He's offering a lot of money. So it's an even trade. It's fair. And everybody else sees it as fair. But Agamemnon is not interested. It didn't please his heart. And so he sends him away and says, don't let me see you around here again. Beat it. And since this man was a priest of Apollo and is in good with Apollo, he goes away weeping, and he asks Apollo, hey, if I ever did anything to make you happy, you punish these Achaeans for me. And as it turns out, Apollo does that. So gods can listen to prayers, and they can directly impact human life. He's described as shooting his arrows, but it's also described as a pestilence. It seems to take the form of, rather than people actually just being hit from arrows that come out of nowhere, there's a pestilence that kind of strikes people down. It starts with the mules and the dogs and then spreads to the men themselves, much like an actual pestilence would or might. And then the pyres of the dead are burning thick. For 9 days, the missiles of the god ranged among the host. And then Achilles calls people together, for the goddess white-armed Hera had put it in his heart, since she pitied the Danaans when she saw them dying. So I remember I said that they're sometimes referred to as Achaeans, sometimes as Danaans. She put it into his heart. We often have experiences where we get an idea. Where did that idea come from? I just had a great idea come up. Homer's explanation of certain ideas is perhaps a god put it into you. Perhaps a god put it in there. That's where that idea came from. It seems reasonable to Homer that some ideas that people come up with were ideas that were placed in them by the gods. And Achilles says, well, let's ask somebody what the problem is. He says this, and then we get our first political lesson of the poem. And it's a poem that's full of them. And a man gets up, and the narrator describes him as Calchas, son of Thestor, far the best of bird diviners. He looks at the entrails of birds, and from this learns what the gods believe or think or want. And he's the best of them. It's not an exact science. It's a matter of some art, and therefore there are degrees of excellence in this. There could be a better and a best. He's the best of them by far, and his skill in this is such that he knew the things that were and that were to be and that had been before, and who had guided the ships of the Achaeans to Ilios, that means Troy, by his own prophetic powers which Phoebus Apollo had bestowed upon him. And so he stands up and then he says, well, all right, I'll tell you what I know, but first you have to promise to protect me, because I think I'm going to make a powerful man angry when I say this. And the lesson is that, okay, everybody knows that if you make somebody angry, a powerful man angry, he might swallow his wrath for the day. Like, he might not show it, but he will cherish resentment in his heart till he brings it to fulfillment, right? The powerful will try to strike back, if you challenge them or criticize them. And I think Homer has set up for us to see the implication that Achilles knows damn well that this guy means Agamemnon. And Achilles might even suspect what he's going to say. So what Achilles says is, take heart, say whatever you want. No one of the whole host of the Danaans, not even if you name Agamemnon, who now claims to be far the best of the Achaeans, no one will lay heavy hands on you, he says. I'll protect you even if it's the king. Who is Achilles that he would do this? Right? He's saying, even if you name our chief king, the guy who's in charge, I won't even let him lay hands on you. Achilles is kind of setting himself up as almost on par and maybe even higher than Agamemnon. And in fact, he uses the phrase, claims to be far the best of the Achaeans. It doesn't say he is the best, he claims to be the best. So maybe Achilles, there's a little bit of power play going on here. But anyway, he makes the promise, and who is he? By the way, he's their best fighter. No one could stand against him. So he is far the best fighter of the Achaeans, and everybody agrees on that. And so if he promises security to this man, that's a pretty good promise. And so the seer then says, sure enough, yeah, it was Agamemnon. And he says everything that the narrator prepared for us earlier. He basically says the priest of Apollo was dishonored. Apollo was angry, and he won't get rid of this loathsome pestilence until we give the daughter back to the priest without even ransom, no ransom this time. And we also have to dedicate a sacred hecatomb. That's a sacrificial offering to Apollo. And then we might appease and persuade him. And then sure enough, Agamemnon gets up, and it turns out that Calchas, the seer, was right to ask for help, because Agamemnon gets up with rage. Now remember, rage is our first word, it's our key theme, and here's our first sense of rage arising in someone. Where does it arise? It arises in Agamemnon because he has been called out in front. He's the leader. He has been called out in front of the whole assembly, blamed for the death that has happened. And then on top of that, Achilles has challenged him, and he naturally would probably just want to kill this guy for calling him out as he did. But Achilles has given him surety, so he doesn't dare do that. So his honor is directly assaulted. He can't do much about it. The reaction is rage. He gets up full of rage. With rage, his black heart was wholly filled, and his eyes were like blazing fire. To Calchas, first of all, he spoke, and his look threatened evil. And he says, prophet of evil, never yet have you spoken to me a pleasant thing? Ever is evil dear to your heart to prophesy, but word of good you have never yet spoken, nor brought to pass. Now, here is an important point where the distinction between narrator's voice and speaker's voice is important. The narrator told us earlier that it was actually Calchas's own efforts that guided the ships of the Achaeans to Ilios by his own prophetic powers. So Agamemnon is wrong when he says, you've never yet spoken a pleasant thing, you've never brought a word of good to pass. No, he actually has done good. Agamemnon is in a rage, and naturally a man in a rage will exaggerate. That's the natural reaction. You know, when you get mad, like, this always happens. You never listen to me. Like, this is the classic sort of thing a human being does when full of rage. They aren't going to be reasonable, and Agamemnon is not reasonable. And so that's why he says what he says. But the narrator has prepared us to understand Agamemnon is wrong. But the narrator doesn't say that. It would actually be kind of inappropriate for the narrator to impugn his own hero's honor. And he seems to protect his own hero's honor by not directly saying, yeah, Agamemnon was a fool. He will never do that. Even though he may present Agamemnon in unflattering light, and from time to time he does do this, he himself never blames him or calls him foolish. The narrator does not attack the honor of his heroes. That's an important point, I think. And you'll notice it as you read. And anyway, Agamemnon gets up, he's angered. Then he reveals why he didn't give her back. And the reason why, which I find hilarious, is that he actually likes the girl better than his own wife. So he says, for certainly I prefer her to Clytemnestra, my wedded wife, since she is not inferior to her either in form or in stature or in mind or in any handiwork. She's not inferior to her, and apparently she is presumably superior in some way. Knowing other things that we know about Clytemnestra, she's probably superior in being more pleasant to be around. But he doesn't say that here. But here is where Agamemnon proves himself worthy in the Homeric sense of being a leader. And what makes him worthy is that he is willing to take the hit to his personal honor for the sake of the people. And he says, yet even so will I give her back if that is better. I would rather the people be safe than perish. So this is a key point that should be kept in mind. Homer presents a world in which even absolute kings. Now remember, all the Achaeans were of the mind that the daughter should be given back to the priest. Agamemnon, as king, overruled them all. It's not a democracy. But at the same time, Agamemnon himself must respect certain considerations of justice. Even he must do that. And it would be inappropriate to allow the people to die for his own fault or for his own profit. He's willing to take the hit. However, this is the privilege of the king in Homer's world. And that privilege is, even though he was in the wrong, and even though he must give something up, he still can demand compensation. And he does demand compensation. And Achilles tries to deny him this compensation, and you'll see what happens there. So Achilles says, most glorious son of Atreus, most covetous of all, how should the great-hearted Achaeans give you a prize? We know nothing of a hoard of wealth in common store, but whatever we took by pillage from the cities has been apportioned, and it is not seemly to gather these things back from the army. So they're not communists. They don't just redistribute wealth. It wouldn't be appropriate. Well, maybe it wouldn't be appropriate, but it is necessary. Achilles makes this offer. Hey, give the girl back, he says, and we will recompense you 3- and 4-fold if ever Zeus grants us to sack the well-walled city of Troy. Now remember, they've been besieging the city for many years now. If that happens, there's no guarantee it could ever happen. So what's Achilles' promise worth? It's kind of worth nothing. And in fact, Agamemnon, until they sack the city, is going to go around dishonored because he will have given up his prize and everyone will know it. And as king, he can't allow that to happen. He can't allow himself to be dishonored. He can't allow that to happen and maintain his position. He'll make that more explicit a little bit later. But this makes him angry, even more angry, and he says, do not thus, mighty though you are, godlike Achilles, seek to deceive me with your wit. So he thinks Achilles is being clever and saying, oh yeah, we'll give you everything you want once we sack Troy. No. You're not going to get by me. You're not going to persuade me. You want me to just sit here while you keep your prize and you order me to give her back? It's like, no, That's not how it's going to be. And then he throws his weight around. The great-hearted Achaeans will select a prize suiting me, and if they don't, I will come and take your prize, or that of Ajax, or that of Odysseus. I will seize and bear away. Angry will he be to whomever I come. So he knows he's just going to pass this anger on. But this is a political necessity, as he makes it clear. He has to do this. He can't allow this to stand. But he says, okay, well, we'll deal with that later. But here is the nature of their conflict. Agamemnon is the king, yes, but he is a king by convention, by power. He has the most power. Achilles has the most natural gifts. Who rules? In Homer's world, there can be a conflict here. It's a dangerous conflict when a political inferior is more gifted. And even an ordinary person can have this experience. I mean, have any of you ever worked in a job where your manager or the person overseeing you didn't understand what you did or couldn't do what you did or was clearly dumber than you in some way? That's the situation here in some ways, where Achilles is the greater man as a warrior, but nevertheless, Agamemnon is in charge. And they're butting heads over this. Achilles is kind of feeling his strength here and trying to throw it around, and Agamemnon sees him doing that and refuses to accept it. Achilles gets angry with him, of course, even saying this, I'll come take your prize. He's, and then he says, how dare you threaten to take my prize away? I might as well just go back home. I'll go back to Pythias. It's far better to return home. And I'm not going to stand here dishonored to pile up riches and wealth for you. And Agamemnon replies, yeah, go, then fine, leave. I don't need you. Flee then if your heart urges you. I do not beg you to remain for my sake. With me are others who will honor me, and above all Zeus, the Lord of counsel. And then he's like, yeah, I don't even like you. Most hateful to me are you of all the kings that Zeus nurtures, for always strife is dear to you in wars and battles. If you are very strong, it was a god, I think, who gave you this gift. Go home with your ships and your companions, and lord it over the Myrmidons. For you I care not, nor take heed of your wrath. Yeah, you mean nothing to me. You're nothing to me. But then he makes it more clear. I will take your prize, and he is going to do this, and this is going to trigger Achilles' titular rage, if you will, or his rage with which we began the poem. As Phoebus Apollo takes from me the daughter of Chryses, her with my ship and my companions I will send back. But I will myself come. He doesn't himself come to his tent, by the way. Agamemnon proves smarter than this. He threatens to come himself, but he sends two men to do it for him. I will myself come to your tent and take the fair-cheeked Briseis, your prize, so that you will understand how much mightier I am than you, and another may shrink from declaring himself my equal and likening himself to me to my face. With these words, Agamemnon makes clear, and through his words, Homer also makes clear to us, this is a political matter for Agamemnon. He can't take the hit to personal honor that Achilles is offering here. He can't accept it. Basically, he's saying, well, I don't want to be dishonored. And Achilles is like, just take the hit, and later on we'll give you something. And Agamemnon's like, no, I'll just take what I want from somebody, or either you guys give me something that I want, or I'll take it from one of you, and I'll take it from whomever I want. And Achilles says, you don't dare do that. I'll go home. And Agamemnon replies, okay, I'm going to take it from you because you clearly are the one who's setting yourself up as equal to me. You're not equal to me. You need to understand that. And I can't have somebody else doing what you do, thinking that they will also be equal to me. These are two alpha males basically going at it. And Agamemnon's trying to indicate that I'm going to be top dog here. Achilles' immediate response is he's of two minds, as Homer puts it. He's torn within his breast. On the one hand, he wants to just kill this guy. I'll kill Agamemnon right now. Or maybe I shouldn't do that. But he's on the verge of drawing his sword, and one of the goddesses comes down. And here we see a direct intervention of the gods in human affairs. As he puts it, it's Athena, the white-armed goddess Hera had sent her forth, for in her heart she, Hera, loved and cared for both men alike. So Athena comes down. She stood behind him and seized the son of Peleus by his fair hair, appearing to him alone. No one of the others saw her. Achilles was seized with wonder and turned around and immediately recognized Pallas Athena. Terribly her eyes shone. Then he addressed her with winged words and said, Why now, daughter of Aegis-bearing Zeus, have you come? Is it so that you might see the arrogance of Agamemnon, son of Atreus? One thing I will tell you, and I think this will be brought to pass, through his own excessive pride he shall presently lose his life. And then Athena says, don't do that. I've come from heaven to stay your anger. If you will obey, by the way, there is free will in this universe. The gods don't just make people do things. She gives him an option. The goddess white-armed Hera sent me forth, for in her heart she loves and cares for both of you. But come, cease from strife, and do not grasp the sword with your hand. With words indeed taunt him, telling him how it shall be. For thus will I speak, and this thing shall truly be brought to pass. Hereafter, 3 times as many glorious gifts shall be yours on account of this arrogance, but refrain and obey us. Now, we are invited to notice that there's a parallel between her offer and Achilles' offer. Achilles' offer to Agamemnon was, later, if we take Troy, you will get a prize. And now Athena is telling him, later, you will be rewarded if you obey now. But the difference is, this is a God speaking it, not a man, and there's no if. She says, thus will I speak, and this thing shall truly be brought to pass. When a God promises, it's a different order of thing than what a man promises. And so this is the kind of promise that a great-souled man can accept. A great-souled man who can foresee future glory for himself can accept dishonor in the present. And that's what Achilles does. He does accept the dishonor. He takes it. Why does he take it? 2 reasons. He can foresee glory, and because he is divinely commanded. And obedience to the gods is something enjoined even upon the greatest hero. And it's the hardest thing because, when your honor is slighted, it's hard to just take that. It's easy for us moderns where we take this kind of abuse almost on a daily basis. But for men of this time, and of this sort, that's not something they're used to taking. But basically, that's what she's saying. You're going to take the abuse and we'll give you glory later. And he says, it is necessary, goddess, to observe the words of you two, however angered a man be in his heart, for it is better so. Whoever obeys the gods, to him do they gladly give ear. And it's not just a matter of, I'm doing this for the sake of what the God will. This is not a Christian religious context. In a Christian context, you do the will of God because it's the will of God. In a Homeric context, you do the will of God because they will listen to you if you do that. If you disobey the gods, they don't listen to your prayers later. You can do things against the gods, and there will be heroes in this poem who do that. But if you do that, you put yourself solely reliant on your own power. And a man reliant on his own power is very vulnerable indeed. A man who has the gods giving ear to him has power. And we've already seen that power because earlier, a priest of Apollo had the ear of a god, and he got what he wanted, or he's about to get what he wanted, because the gods listened to him. So Achilles does obey, and this obedience is a crucial part of a hero. And then he really does insult him. He calls him a drunk and an ugly pussy, basically. He says, heavy with wine, with the face of a dog, but the heart of a deer. So he's hitting him on 3 key points for the Greek mind. Being a drunk means you're a slave to your passions. Face of a dog means you're ugly. We don't sort of care about this as much, but for Greeks, your personal appearance is indicative of your soul. If you're beautiful, you also have a beautiful soul, or you should. And face of a dog means you're ugly, and you also are ugly on the inside. So it's more of an insult in that context. Heart of a deer, you run away. You don't have courage. Not really a man. So those are 3 big insults for, an alpha male to hear. And then he says, never have you had courage to arm for battle along with your people or go forth to an ambush. By the way, arm for battle with your people, I think we could all understand that as a heroic thing. Going forth to ambush, this is actually very distinctly Greek. For the Greeks, it's also heroic to surprise attack people, to lay an ambush, to deceive and lie to the enemy to get an advantage over them. That's also glorious, right? They don't have this concept of fair fight, or it's not exactly the same concept as we have. So this business of ambushing, and if you continue to read the poem, there is a point later where two heroes do go on an ambush, and they capture a man and they threaten him to get information out of him. And that's presented as a glorious episode. Go forth to ambush with the chief of the Achaians. That seems to you even as death. And so he continues to insult him. He calls him people-devouring king. You rule over nobodies, or this will be your last piece of insolence. And then he makes a promise, and he promises this, I won't help anybody out. That's it. I'm not helping out any more. And you will rue the day that this happened. You will all wish for Achilles in your heart. So it's the classic thing that someone does when they're hungry. You'll wish you had me around, in the future. And of course they will. That is kind of the plot of the poem. So surely someday a longing for Achilles will come upon the sons of the Achaeans, one and all. And on that day you will not be able to help them at all, you meaning Agamemnon, for all your grief, when many shall fall dying before man-slaying Hector. But you will gnaw at the heart within you in anger that you did no honor to the best of the Achaeans. And then he walks away. Nestor gets up, and Nestor is, he's an older man. 2 generations of mortal men had passed away in his lifetime, and he was king among the third. So he's older. He's like in his 60s, 70s, and he's not a great warrior anymore, but he is great with speech. And for Homer, there is a glory, there is an honor in being good with words. Homer does not merely glorify warriors and people who kill, he also glorifies good speakers. And Nestor is one of his heroes, and his sweet speech is introduced here, from whose tongue flowed sweeter than honey, he says. He comes up and here's how he tries to reconcile them. I think his attempt to reconcile shows his perception of the situation and maybe shows a way in which we can perceive what happened. So he says, okay, you're both younger than me. I lived among heroes of an earlier age, and even those heroes listened to me, so you should too. And so for Agamemnon, he says, don't take Achilles' prize. We'll find something for you. And then also, Achilles, don't strive with a king, might against might. For it is no common honor that is the portion of a scepter-holding king to whom Zeus gives glory. If you are a stronger fighter and a goddess mother bore you, yet he is the mightier since he is king over more. That's the logic of the situation. Yes, it is conventional. It is a matter of, he just happens to be king over more people. Nevertheless, this is a person to whom Zeus gives glory. He deserves the higher position because of that. Even though Achilles is a demigod and the best fighter, nevertheless, the Homeric hierarchy is such that the chieftains are chief. And he asks him to check your rage, let your anger go. So he basically asks them both to let their anger go. And Agamemnon says, all right, you've spoken well, but this man wishes to be above all others. Over all he wishes to rule, and over all to be king, and to all to give orders. In this, I think, there is someone who will not obey. So again, this goes back to my point where the problem with Achilles is that he was setting himself up to be equal to Agamemnon, as I showed earlier. And although the narrator doesn't blame his hero, because as I said, he doesn't directly blame them, he, through the mouths of his heroes, he has Nestor, who's sort of trying to be the peacemaker, and then Agamemnon. From both perspectives, both men see that Achilles is sort of getting out of his place and should remain in his place. But Achilles can't just accept that because of the threat to his honor that's been made and the fact that he has pledged himself to not helping. And Achilles says, I would be called cowardly and of no account if I'm to yield to you in every matter that you say. On others lay these commands. Do not give orders to me, for I do not think I shall obey you any longer. And another thing I will tell you, take it to heart. With my hands, I will not fight for the girl's sake either with you or with any other, since you are taking away what you have given. So here's what Achilles grants thanks to Nestor's words. He's like, I won't resist. You can take, he grants that you're within your rights to take the girl. You could take the girl because you were the one who gave her. So you can take her back. But the consequence of that, and I'm telling you right now, is I'm not going to help you anymore. You dishonored me. I don't have to take it. And he is within his rights to say that. Agamemnon can direct him, but Agamemnon can't command him to fight. There is a degree to which they are doing this out of their own choice. And when they're in battle, Agamemnon has power over them. And when they're in council and they're deciding how to divide up the booty, Agamemnon has authority. But he cannot command him to fight. And so Achilles is withdrawing his agreements there. So that is the origin of the fight. That is what the fight is about. That is what Achilles' rage begins from. And that is what the path of the poem examines. All right? So the middle of book 1 describes how they come to take the girl. Achilles doesn't blame the two men that come to take the girl. He's like, I know you're just following orders. That's fine. And then Achilles prays to his mother, and we get some additional insight into why this is such a big deal. Because when his mother comes, his mother is a goddess, Thetis, and she reveals that Achilles is doomed to die young. Your span of life is brief and endures no long time, but now you are doomed to a speedy death and are laden with sorrow above all men. Later in the poem, Achilles reveals that he had a choice of fates. And one fate was he could be a normie, he could live the life of a normal man, no renown, and live long. And to some degree, that is what the choice of the normie is. Or he could live the life of a hero, but he would die young. But he would die young, but he would attain eternal glory. And he chose the life of glory. Nevertheless, the position he finds himself in now is, where's the glory? Was taken away from him. He's been dishonored and rebuked, by, a man who's over him. He had to accept that this man was over him, which is, rankling to him as well. And his rage is such that he can't fight and win more glory. What can he do? And he knows he's going to die young. So he sort of doesn't know, what to do. He asks his mother for help. I had a friend who was a Navy SEAL who, the way he described it is, if you can't cry to your mother, who can you cry to? So even a manly man might have to cry to his mother, but that's the only one that you would do you do that to, perhaps. So anyway, he asked for help, and she says she will help him, and she does go up to the gods, and basically she puts herself at the knee of Zeus and says, I've helped you out in the past. Please assist my son, grant him glory among the Achaeans, and give aid to the Trojans so that they need Achilles and that they spare no expense to bring Achilles back into the battle. And Zeus is unwilling to do this. And the reason he's unwilling to do this is, to some degree, a classic situation. He doesn't want to have a fight with his wife. Greatly troubled Zeus, the cloud gatherer, spoke to her. Surely this will be sorry work, since you will set me on to engage in strife with Hera, when she shall anger me with taunting words. Even now she always upbraids me among the immortal gods and declares that I give aid to the Trojans in battle. But for the present depart again, lest Hera note something, and I will take thought for these things to bring all to pass. Come, I will bow my head to you, that thou may be certain, for this from me is the surest token among the mortals. No word of mine may be recalled, nor is false, nor unfulfilled, to which I bow my head. So this is the will of Zeus working its way to its fulfillment. That was set up in the early part of book 1. He is now committing to it. His will is going to be working its way to its fulfillment through the course of the poem. And as we'll see, it goes through many twists and turns. But he does bow his head. But Hera sees what's going on, and Hera's no fool. She knows who Thetis is. She knows what happened down among the Achaeans. And so she comes up and says, hey, what's going on? And he says, it's my business. It's none of your business. If I want you to know my business, you're the first one I'll tell. But if I want to keep things private, I'll keep them private. And then she basically says, yeah, I know what it is. I have wondrous dread at heart, lest silver-footed Thetis, daughter of the old man of the sea, have beguiled you. At early dawn she sat by you and clasped your knees. To her I think you bowed your head in sure token that you will honor Achilles and bring many to death beside the ships of the Achaeans. And he gets mad. Zeus gets mad because, I can't get away with anything. And he's like, yeah, well, so what? There's nothing you can do about it. Then that's the way I'm going to be. Sit down and shut your mouth. Sit down in silence and obey my word, lest all the gods that are in Olympus avail you not against my drawing near when I put forth upon you my irresistible hands. So the gods can be at strife, the gods can be angry, and Hera is afraid of this. Her son Hephaestus comes up and tells her, not to take it too angry. And so they turn to pleasures. And that's how the first book ends. I think that's enough for you to proceed to read the poem and see how the will of Zeus is fulfilled, see how this rage is kindled in other heroes and how it acts, what happens because of it. And remember that this rage is the characteristic emotion of a key part of the soul, part concerned with honor. And so much of the poem will also be concerned with personal honor and with self-assertion to a high degree. In fact, to a degree that in a Christian context can seem ridiculous or sinful, as it did to many later writers. One thing that you might find of interest is that in the Christian Middle Ages, when they got their understanding of the story of Troy, was they were on the side of the Trojans, not the Achaeans. And they saw the Trojans as, well, one of the heroes of the Trojans was Aeneas, and he founded Rome, and he is the origin of the Western culture, not the Achaeans, which I think is a key point. And one reason for that is Aeneas, as portrayed by Virgil, is known for his piety, pius Aeneas. Now, of course, it's Roman piety, not Christian piety. Nevertheless, it's a different virtue. It's not this Greek sense of honor. But even outside of the Christian context, we all have a sense of our personal honor, things that we would do and not do, things would be disgraced to do. That's still a part of who we are. And knowing when and where and how to stand up for oneself in those contexts is absolutely crucial in human life. And this poem will display many circumstances in which these things are done. And one of the things that Achilles does, the path he takes, is knowing what he knows about himself. He is not going to put up with being dishonored and taking orders from a man who dishonors him. I think that's enough of a guide, and I hope if you go on to read this poem that you see even more in it and more of interest and pleasure than just what I've outlined here.